welcome listeners, and thanks very much for being with us again today on our next iteration of Coffee with Cow. For those of you that don't know it, Cow is our lovable mascot here. It travels all over the world with many of our teams and is probably the best traveled piece of swag, I think, that I know of anyway. But thanks for being with us again. I would just like to welcome our participants for today, Dr. Justin Velten, who is the co-founder of Go Culture International. Thanks for being with us today.
Chris, thank you so much. I'm so excited. You know, I do some of these different times and sometimes I do them out of thinking, okay, that's what I should do, but I really wanted to do this one. This one's a lot of fun. Enjoy you and Kara and the work you all do at Learn International. It's a great work, great service. And so I'm really proud to be on here and to talk with you today. I'm also really thankful that I'm not the cow, because I wasn't sure if like Coffee with the Cow was me. So
you know, it's so funny because we got this thing done, and we try to be as democratic as we can be in the office. And so, there was 9 or 10 different templates, and there was different types of coffee cups, and it was really important that it's recyclable. And actually, we really would have preferred, a non-takeaway cup, permanent cup, but we couldn't find a good-looking one. So we did this. And then there was all these multitude of cows, and we just couldn't decide on one, so we decided without the cow. But you made a good point, and I remember thinking at the time, are people going to think that they're the cow? And what's the connotation of that? No, you're not the cow. Absolutely, there's only one cow.
Okay, good.
Is and that's it. And
it would have been okay. It would have been fine.
Well, listen, I'm glad we cleared it up, and for those listeners, now we know what the situation is with the cow.
Absolutely.
This, Justin, tell us a little bit. Your organization is extremely interesting, but I want to go back pre-Go Culture, because I think it's important to kind of set the scene of who you are, what your organization is, but how did you get there? Tell us a little bit about your path in life that's brought you to where you are.
Great question, and I appreciate you asking that, Chris. So, I was actually prior to Go Culture, working with Go Culture in kind of a tangential way. And so I was actually a university professor teaching intercultural communication, interpersonal, small group, organizational, persuasion, conflict, all these different courses dealing with communication for 14 years. And during that period, I was loosely, but really consistently partnered with a guy out of Abilene, Texas. And this guy is in his 70s now. His name is Carly Dodd. And Carly was one of he'd been teaching for 47 years. And he was one of the leading scholars in this intercultural competency research area. And so we connected back in 2005 and really hit it off, became really close. So close that actually he introduced me to Laura, who is now my wife. And then 2 years afterward, he ended up marrying us. And so we've maintained a strong relationship over time. And I've been really fortunate to have that relationship because of his position within this community of scholars who really have been seeking to understand this idea of intercultural competency. Why is it that some people do really well in navigating cross-cultural, whether it be domestically or internationally, and some just really struggle with that, and they struggle in different ways. And so how can we actually understand that? And so I was teaching, he was teaching, but on the side, we were involved in a 20-year research initiative that turned into Go Culture International.
Wow. That's amazing. And when you started that was it going to be longitudinal when you were starting it? Were you predicting it to be a 20-year initiative, or was it something that kind of just grew when you opened that door and walked through?
Yeah, that's a big question to ask, because there are a lot of people out there who you can go on LinkedIn or I guess Google search and find individuals who are intercultural coaches, we'll say, or cross-cultural coaches. And I've had conversations with those great people, some wonderful people, and I will just ask, hey, what got you into this? And they'll say, well, I did a study abroad once when I was in college, and it was great. And so I became an intercultural coach. But nothing happened in between. I think this is important here. It's important that they had that experience, and it was good. and it was transformational for them. But then they just turned around and decided to be a coach, or they put some sort of assessment together, or they put some sort of flashy website together, and there's no substance in between those two. Does that make sense? Like there's the experience was rich, and then from that they just go become an expert. And we didn't want to be that. Like there are so many people out there doing that who have said, hey, we have an assessment, we have a program, we have this, we have that, we'll charge you a lot of money to come to campus, and we will do debriefings and coaching sessions and do it in this kind of 1970s model of maybe doing some assessing, and then you have to hire a consultant to come in and work with every student, and that just wasn't working, wasn't proving that effective. And we were not seeing that the data provided by those types of programs were really that strong. You're typically in a data that's provided in a traditional assessment model, and to be nerdy for a second, Chris, is that reliability factors, which are really important, are at about a 43%, or what's called a 0.43 on Cronbach alpha. Now that, statistically speaking, is actually quite strong. But when you think about, okay, how reliable is this data in the real world, you're looking at less than 50-50 shot. And so we wanted to say, okay, if the attrition rate and the failure rate and the struggling rate for people across higher education, military, corporate, humanitarian, that attrition rate for relocation and cross-cultural interaction sets around 50%. Is there a way that if we dedicate enough of our background research, what's been researched outside of us, but what we can develop, if we spend enough time really honestly digging into this, can we find a key or a solution to these problems? And so that was our heart. We wanted to see, can we actually help people by diving in enough, not just saying, here are some great questions, fill this out, and we're going to charge you a bunch to come in and do consulting. No, we wanted to know, can we get really, really, really accurate data? Because only when I can understand what makes Chris really good at cross-cultural transitioning and what makes me really bad at it, or not as good as Chris, only when I can understand what it is about that person, can I then understand how do I help that person become someone who can do this really, really, really well. And so that process took a long time. In order to do it right, we spent about 8 years just developing the assessment, starting from a ton of questions, working with people outside our fields, counseling and all, to put together some really rich content. And then after about 8 years of testing on that, we began getting that assessment in place. We spent the next 13 years just testing it, testing in different groups, over 3,000 clients representing work in over 40 different countries. We wanted to know, before we were one of those people who said, hey, let's just take this to market. We wanted to know, does it really work? Does it really help? And so that's why it took us 20 years.
Wow, what an undertaking. I like the individualized nature of it. It makes logical sense coming from somebody who is underversed, to say the least, in terms of, I suppose, theoretical intercultural communication. That makes perfect sense. And I think when you look across a whole bunch of sectors, and particularly things that are delivered online or remotely, it's that individual piece that people are looking for now. Everybody, they want it all. They want it in a form through which they can consume when they want to consume, but they don't want generic. I don't have time to do that. I want it to speak to me and my personality. So I find that interesting.
Yeah, we ran into a challenge a little while back, and that was that when you have a couple of PhDs doing this kind of work for individuals, couples, or large groups, it's really rich because you get to see it firsthand, the impact you're having. But we also began to realize there are just two of us, and we can't kind of do this old model any longer because what we had was working. And when we saw that, we decided, well, is there a way to provide this to a larger group? It wasn't a business decision. We're not business people. We're scholars, right? And so we said, well, what if we put it online like so many other programs? And we thought, well, we only want to do that if we do not sacrifice the legitimacy of the assessment we had developed and the strength and the impact of the training program we had also developed in tandem with that. And so we actually, again, we're nerds, and so we put this to the test. We did testing of in person versus online, and Chris, we were blown away by finding out that the online group actually outperformed the in-person group. Now, this was super encouraging for us because we felt like, okay, we can still provide this rich experience to so many more people now, and it's no longer dependent upon me being in their presence. And so the trick there is to do, kind of what you're calling like a personalized experience without personal interaction. Now that, like you said, that is becoming key, even more so as we're in a world pandemic where we're not allowed to be in each other's presence as much or as readily. That's not as readily accepted. Instead, an online platform allows us to reach so many more people in a way that's comfortable for them. Like you said, on their phones right here, whenever they want to be able to access that. So it's a personalized experience without personal interaction.
Mm-hmm. Where I'm interested to know, did you dig down into the reasons behind why it was more successful online rather than in person?
Yeah, so that's a very scholarly question of you, Chris. Great job. You should be teaching in a graduate school somewhere. So
Thanks. I'm trying.
You could teach wherever you wanted to. Hey, with the great Irish sound, I mean, you can get away with all kinds.
It doesn't matter what I'm talking about.
No, it sounds
Yeah.
cool. It sounds so smart. So, yeah, that's a great question. We, when we're doing a study like that, we're trying to find out at best, a good study, you're looking for maybe one thing. And I think that's sometimes a downfall for especially young scholars. I remember being in my doctoral program, and as we looked at even just one class assignment, a project, I had a fellow student who wanted to do like this massive study, like go up in the mountains of North Carolina in the U.S. and like study these indigenous people. And I was like, dude, that's great. Even the teacher said, look, that's really great, but you're never going to get that done. And so there's a temptation to want to do everything. And so what we wanted to do though is we needed to know was, can it still work online? And so maybe a downfall of ours, I'm not sure, but that was our focus, and our focus proved, the purpose really proved, and it kind of fleshed out that, wow, not only is it okay online, but it is better. And so we look back at that, and what we did not do, we didn't have mechanisms in place to find out why. All we can do now is speculate. And so, but we've talked to a lot of people about this, and really from what we know about trends and different things with technology, we know that likely, and based on what we cover in these things, there's a tendency to do better online because there's some privacy. You're not looking at me face to face and having to disclose some things. There's journaling and things we can do on there, but there's a sense of privacy there. There's also, excuse me, we like the fact that we can access training over and over and over again, rather than just having a one-time kind of mini lecture. And again, in that lecture, you want to say something and think something and ask, but others are listening. And so there's that privacy, access 24/7. But there's also this thing that, it's not generationally so much, because it's not just me or younger adults or, like our parents' age, Chris. These are across the board. We are learning as a society to learn and seek information from a handheld device. And so we would prefer not having, again, that personal interaction, having to go and actually be and sit with or sit through 45-minute discussions and things. We would like to be able to go to our app, pull up what we want to go over right now, engage with that, pause it at any moment, put it away, come back to it at your convenience. and I think that really resonates with people. And so I think those are some of the reasons why we're seeing a greater success on the online platform. That's not even to mention the benefits to the universities and the schools who implement a program like Go Culture, right? Because now they're able to offer a streamlined process for students and for the department that saves a ton of time and saves a ton of money in how they're able to deliver intercultural competency education.
Has anybody said to you, and please don't leave the call when I say this, but has anybody said to you the irony, I don't know, in that people would prefer to engage on an individual basis to learn more about interpersonal, intercultural communication through a telephone rather than directly? I mean, I see the potential for you know, exponential delivery of a program in the way a student wants to engage. So I absolutely. So I think I agree with what you're saying. I also find it ironic that people would prefer to engage individually in the room or, you know, on their telephone, and I think that's reflective of society as a whole. One of the things that, I'm terrible for tangents, I warned you about this before we started, but one of the things when I get on a roll is my personal worry, you know, not a parent yet, I hope to be one day, but personally would be screen time and the focus that younger individuals have on that itself, on gaming, those types of things that kind of pull you away from interpersonal communication, which I think is one of the most, if not the most important thing to be able to do and to progress and succeed in life in general.
That's a great question. So, yeah, you're looking to solve a major world problem there, Chris. You should be a doctoral student.
Look, we have another 40 minutes. We should have it done and dusted.
Yeah, no, you're on the right track here. So, if a society is willing and desires to absorb content through a certain platform, though it may not be historically the societal way of doing that, to say, well, we prefer, and in person has done well. It's not ideal, right? Because it's the cost and the time and everything. We've liked that. It's been okay. And so you're bringing an online program to that doesn't make sense. I will tell you that people are much more receptive to an online offering that is different now. While we're in, and then pre-COVID, I mean, all of a sudden it's like telehealth, right? People were like, "Yeah, you did telehealth. Like, you can't do that." All of a sudden, whoa, we got to have telehealth. It's great, you know. So similarly, Go Culture's in a position where we've been teaching higher education, but the antiquated model of having someone come to your campus and do extensive one-on-ones with students, though maybe rich, is just not practical. And beyond that, the practicality portion, I'm not sure that it's that effective. And what we found actually is that online can be even more effective. And so what we do is we take the societal tendency to gravitate to an online learning method, right? Because again, that's kind of the preference of people. But what we do, Chris, is interesting. During that training, we create a switch that says, okay, here is your challenge. You know, if we look at some areas related to diversity and inclusion, which, as you know, our ability to relocate and transition and interact cross-culturally, a lot of that has to do with diversity and inclusion. And so some of our factors we look at deal with that. And so let's say you have a lower score in your, inclusiveness and diversity and things. Well, what we're going to do is you're going to find that while you're going through the training and the convenience of your online app right here, we are going to encourage you, force is too much of a word. We're going to encourage and nudge you out to now go out and engage one-on-one or in groups, or diverse groups. And so we are using, again, societal model of online that engages these groups of learners, but then we turn around and say, okay, now based on this, go out and do this. And so they're getting kind of both. It's not just a lecture and I'm done. There's the kind of there's assessments and results, training, action on their part, and they come back and they actually journal about this. Okay, what did I do in this situation? What was the experience and things like that. So it's more of a well-rounded approach.
Yeah, I can equate that to, an online pre-departure information delivered via video, via online, whatever it is. You're talking more theoretical. Which side of the road do they drive on? All of these types of basic things, but it's engaged and it's consumed remotely pre-departure, and then it's essential information for when a student is overseas. So I understand that.
Yeah,
Can
and
I?
what
Can I?
you're talking about too,
Sorry, go
Chris,
ahead.
there's been a tendency in the in the past to focus primarily on culture, context stuff, content, right? So um, if somebody is going to do study abroad in Ireland, we could go to um, let's say university is partnering with Learn International to do a trip and experience in Ireland. So the school might really focus on Ireland culture learning. Now that's really important. There's some really rich content there pre-departure, and maybe separate from you all. You all may provide some of that stuff, but I know it's not the bulk of what you do. You're providing the experience and that customer service there. But there are organizations who, in higher education or out in more corporate professional worlds, they provide mostly culture specific training. And there are two things here. One is we're in an information age now, and any of us can Google search certain things, right? If I'm going to Switzerland, I can Google search culture norms. Now, is there still going to be a learning curve when I get there and I need to watch and observe and adapt? Absolutely. But I can learn so much through Google. And then the second thing is that has not, culture specific training has not proven to statistically improve the likelihood of long-term success in a relocation. So to kind of unpack that real quick. So if I know I'm going to be going to Singapore, I can contact a culture coach, go through 2 days of training about culture in Singapore. I go, and some things make sense. Oh yeah, the coach said this would happen. Oh yeah, here's what I need to, when I negotiate a rent, whatever, here's what I need to do. Okay, but that has nothing to do with what's going to happen emotionally, psychologically, all these implications that are taking place from week 1 to week 16 that actually dictate, am I going to stay and thrive? And so what we have done is we've actually stepped back and say, well, if that's not working, there's got to be something different or more robust here. And so we began looking, as you talked earlier, at that individual. And it turns out that if we can focus on the individual and his or her aptitudes for being inclusive, dealing with diversity, dealing with change, uncertainty, those types of things that are important in a study abroad or relocation or cross-cultural interaction at all, if we can target those within an individual and train them on their areas where they may struggle, wow, that is where we're finding a statistically significant improvement in someone's likelihood of actually going, accomplishing a task, and thriving instead of returning home early a wreck.
Do you see a difference in the competency and success rates of those individuals traveling internationally from two different populations, those that are during career professionals and students? Are the career professionals more experience, have more life experience, and therefore are going to be more successful, or is it inverse, or are the two populations the same?
Yeah, it's a smart question. Yeah, it fluctuates a little bit, but it's not a major fluctuation. So typically across the board, when we started studying this and doing some work in this, the expat attrition rate was about 64%. And so now it fluctuates from as low as 30 some percent to 50%. And so at 50%, it's pretty rough. And so Um, and that's typically true across multiple contexts, higher ed, um, uh, military, all these different groups. And so, but there are some interesting kind of caveats in there, and that is uh, international, what we might call international students in the U.S., but that really is anybody outside the U.S. doing study abroad to the U.S. So uh, pre-COVID, we had a lot of students in the U.S. who are studying long-term, maybe getting a 4-year degree or even an advanced degree from places like India and China. Right, that's really great that that's happening or was happening, but it can be a little deceiving when it comes to their success rate because they have a tendency to want to stay even when it gets tough for a couple of reasons, a myriad of reasons really, but uh, they don't want to be a quote unquote failure. They don't want to go back home after a year and a half or a semester and be deemed a failure. There's a lot of pride, right? And kind of saving face. And so, and they don't want to disgrace themselves or their families. And so they're going to stick it out. Now, that may on paper look like, oh, look, we have next to no attrition rate on our international students. Man, we're doing a great job. Let me tell you, those students are struggling. That's just the way it is. They're struggling. And no matter how good it looks on paper, they're struggling. And so I think the good schools are the ones who say, okay, well, what can we do, even if they're staying, to help them have their best experience? And I say good schools because those are the ones who truly care about the students, but they're also the schools who understand the bottom line, the big picture, the long game, because as we know with international education, if I can show you as an institution, of higher ed, a college, I can show one student from a region of a country in, let's say, Central Asia, that we treat you really well here. We really care. Well, then you can just open the doors and you can expect more and more students with limited marketing coming to you. Likewise, or I should say opposite of that, if you take one student from a Central Asia area who comes to you, takes a risk, and you don't treat them well. Yeah, maybe they stick around, but you don't give them special attention in any way or help in any way. You can expect no more students from that area to come to you because of that one bad experience. There's an incredible word of mouth chain reaction that takes place here that we can either handle well, cater to, and have a strong student population coming in, or we can mishandle it. And I think one of the best ways to handle this and to show students that we really care is not just to recruit, get them here, file some paperwork for them, and send them to class, but as before they get here and as they're here, using strong data through Go Culture, using strong services through Go Culture, dovetailing that with the services that are on campus, and really making sure that that student, where we know with incredible certainty he or she is struggling, how can we help that student? Because a lot of those students, because of their pride and just the way they were brought up, they don't want to come to you and say, hey, I'm really struggling. First of all, they think they're the only ones. They don't know what to call it to begin with, or the struggle. And they're just kind of embarrassed, right? They don't want to seem weak. And so they keep it to themselves and they just bury it and struggle. It's our job to be proactive and say, hey, let's run through some stuff here and let's look, and maybe we'll bring out some conversation pieces, and let us be proactive in helping you, not just depending on you to come to us to ask.
What kind of can we go real grassroots here? What kind of struggles do you see? From the inbound international population, say full degree. But let me qualify that by asking a sub question. Do you see particular cultural difficulties from individual students from a region, say coming from China, relative to coming from India, I mean, I remember in a past life, I was working with language learners inbound to Ireland from Spain and Italy, and food was a major problem for them. because of the way it was delivered. In Ireland, you get a big mound of a plate and everything is on one plate and that's it. Whereas they are used to the different courses and eating at a different time and those types of things. So that's obviously culturally specific to that country. And there's this kind of, we're not meeting there. So are you seeing those types of issues in the States? And are there also common issues that all inbound students tend to typically have issues with?
Yeah. So on a kind of student by student or country of origin by country of origin, there are some differences, but again, that's where we go back and say, yes, if I'm an American professor and I have a Chinese student or Japanese student in my classroom, I need to be aware that he or she may or may not be struggling, but he or she is not going to come to me about it because they kind of have this high power distance way of thinking, right? Where I am this professor and that's intimidating, and they may be struggling, but they can't come to me. Like that's disrespectful. And so I need to be proactive and saying, hey, I want to make sure I'm helping you and that you understand everything. Don't, try my best. It's difficult to break these, or not break, or to help them work through these challenges, these cultural challenges and differences. I can't just go up to them and say, hey, don't worry about it. Just come talk to me anytime and know that they're okay. I mean, you're changing 20 years of upbringing. One simple statement is not going to solve it. I need to show that student, look, let me come sit down with you. Let me get your book with you, and let me say, okay, tell me what's going on here, because you're not going to offend me. I want to make sure you're good here, and I know this can be a challenge. Empathize with them, and so I think that's part of that responsibility falls to us as educators. Some care more than others, we know, in education, but there are different students handle or struggle in different ways, I should say, like you're asking in the relocation from others. But again, by and large, what we're seeing is we look at 15 different factors. We're not looking at just stress, which is important, but there's a lot more to relocation success than just stress. We're not looking at cultural adaptability or compatibility, like some other assessments. We're looking at that individual, and we're looking at the individual in 15 different areas. And so what we're able to do is say, okay, in these 15 areas, where are we scoring really high? Where are we see some possible red flags? And again, we know with incredible accuracy, this is really true information. And so they may not realize it yet, but we can go to them and say, hey, instead of saying, hey, it looks like you're scored pretty low here, what are you doing? We can instead say, hey, tell me about this. What are your thoughts about this? Have you had any experiences with this, and have been positive or negative? And kind of being proactive in how we open up the conversation with them. But when it comes to across the board, are there standard challenges that higher education students typically deal with? I always go back to this. This is, to me, in all the years I've been doing this, Chris, and working with individuals and couples and families and large groups, small groups, the person who has relocated, that person's family plays one of the most significant roles in whether he or she will be successful. Now, that's different depending on, right, the context, because for me, if I were to relocate, I have a wife and 2 kids. Okay, that's my family, but I also have extended family because my parents, my wife's parents, who have grandkids in my household, and if I move them across the ocean, that's a kind of a peripheral a challenge and effect that can have on the likelihood of our success. But even, and then that makes sense, right? Grandparents want grandkids home, but even for these higher education students, many of whom are not married, they're single, they're going out on this adventure. Maybe they went with some friends, maybe they went solo, they're making some friends, starting to work through these challenges. And if they hit a hard day or a hard week, midterms come along, they've been having a difficult time, what we call keeping their head above water to begin with. and there are language challenges, culture challenges, all this work and trying to get all this done, and then try to make friends in a new place. And then here comes midterm exams, and I feel overwhelmed. And there's a lot. Everybody seems so stressed, and I'm stressed. And so if you call home and you say, "Mom and Dad, I don't know. I don't know if I should have done this." This is an important moment, because if mom and dad can either say, "Hey, you were meant to do this. This is a great decision. We're so proud of you. This is going to be tough, but you're tougher. You can do this. What can we do to help you make it?" That is incredibly helpful, right? Because that's a pivotal moment. Because instead of mom and dad said, "Yeah, we kind of told you shouldn't be doing this, and it's costing us a lot of money, and it's just probably a little too much for you. I tell you what, hey, mom's in the kitchen right now making your favorite dinner, and your friends have been coming over, your friends from high school. Why don't you just come home and we'll do some stuff here instead?" If you're in a vulnerable moment like that, and as a student, you're far away from home, a lot going on, well, you're very likely to say, "I'm gone," and just pack up and go. And so I think, if I can answer your question that way, Chris, the family, whatever family means to you, that is proven to be one of the most important elements depicting whether somebody will be successful long term or not.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I myself, I lived just under 5 years in Australia and New Zealand, and I had that moment where I had a career there. I was working in the private English language industry, and fantastic, living in a place. I had to pinch myself. It was like a postcard every day, and I always remember thinking, right, I feel like there's two types of expats. There's those that ring home once a week, and there's those that ring home once a year. And I was a once a week kind of guy. And so I got to the point where I was like, okay, I've had my experience, and that's it. But I didn't feel pressured either way. I was thinking about life, and, as you say, getting married, having kids, and the proximity to family, and those types of things. But even between now and then, it's a different world in terms of the proximity one can have at distance, given, look at what we're doing now. You're sitting in Texas, and I'm sitting in Ireland, and we're having this frank discussion, which is great. But yeah, I think that, and one other thought, example came into my head about a student that we had for one of our, probably the second or third year we were in operation, and we had a student coming from the Southwest in the States, rooting through Chicago. And it was a faculty led a short 2-week program, and the students were coming from all over, as happens every now and then. And so he was rooting through Chicago, and he was going to meet up at the airport with everybody at a certain time, and we're hopping on the bus, and off we go. And this is the first time he'd been on a long haul flight. Got to Chicago, and his flight was delayed from his home airport, and so he missed his connection, and everybody else had gone ahead. I think everybody was coming together in Chicago and what have you. So he missed his connection, and he just froze. He had no capability to know what to do in this instance. So he rang home, and they bought him. Or no, he didn't ring home. He just took out his credit card and bought a ticket on the next flight home. And I remember speaking to the person in charge of study abroad at the time, and I was like, I don't know the situation with the family. I don't know to what extent they can put their hand in their pocket and put them on another plane. But I said, this is a critical moment in that student's life, in that you're teaching them it's fine to go home when things get tough. And they did that. And I picked him up personally from the airport and did an 8-hour round trip, which brought him back to his thing. And he had a great time in the end. And he studied abroad twice, I think, after that. So it was great. But if he hadn't got back on that plane, I think it would have had a material effect on the rest of his life in terms of, his personal development, but then also his exposure internationally. So, yeah, that's I think about that story quite a bit. Tell me a little bit about self-awareness and communication from the point of view of, let's talk a little bit about faculty, okay, and their responsibility, because you touched on that earlier, and their responsibility in terms of management of the classroom. Because I want the listeners here to be thinking about, okay, well, what's happening in my university, and maybe this conversation will kind of spark them into, well, how am I really managing international students in my classroom, and those types of things. I need to be globally competent so that I understand the stresses and strains that they are going through, even if they're not being able to, if they're not culturally able to express themselves. And it was interesting hearing you say, both Japanese and Chinese, to an extent other countries in the Far East. But I've had that example. So to what extent can faculty be introspective, and what are the steps that they can take to better prepare themselves and better manage their classrooms with international students in them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an important question. So I think it's important. There's been a model for years that if anything was done, that we just kind of threw a kind of a blanket, what's the word, or orientation type training over international students, right? We kind of separate them off and we go through a training, and there's a lot of paperwork, and then there's also, talk to mom and dad, and here's some just blanket things. And that's good. That's a great show of compassion and care and specialized concern for them. But I don't know if that's as effective as if we were able to understand, if I have 300 international students coming into my campus this year, what if instead of saying, hey, everybody, here's the cafeteria, here's where you can go for counseling, and all these things are important. What if instead I could say, hey, we really do sincerely care about your experience, not just at the university, but we want you to be successful in so many different other ways. So here's what we're going to do. Once you're accepted, you're going to get access to a program like Go Culture, and you're going to be able to do a 15-minute assessment. And from that assessment, you're going to be able to see, okay, as I launch into this, not just about the school, but me as a person, am I going to hit some roadblocks? And if so, what can I do to get ready to do better at that while I'm on campus? So they start going through this ahead of time. They continue to have access to it throughout the year. And then with strong confidentiality policies in place, we are also able to share data with faculty who, on a need to know basis, and administrators, for a couple of reasons. One, so that they can be aware, we have a high, kind of a high alert student here, maybe with a lot of challenges predicted. So let's really make sure we're attentive to that student. Not just the blanket training, but we see, okay, 15 factors, we have 300 students. It looks like 100 of these students, for whatever this semester coming in, score kind of low in one of these areas. Well, then we don't have to section those 100 off, but next time we have an orientation or a group meeting, let's talk about this. Let's say, hey, sometimes being away from family can be a challenge. Is anybody experiencing that? Well, let me tell you, that's common. And then let's talk about that. Let's talk about some skills to work through these things. How do we talk to our family? What are some of the words we use with our family? Like, instead of dangerous and things, we use words like adventure, growth opportunity, things, simple things like reframing with our families, or we can help do more communication with our family instead of less communication with our family, helping them see that, look, we're doing well. Here's what I need from you, but look, right now I'm doing really well in this. And so I think specializing the training around either a subset of groups or per student can really be helpful. And that's why I think one of the great things about an online offering is because when it's done well, you can actually work students into groups and say, okay, here's our whole university international student population. How are we doing, right? From the moment they come in to that first semester or to the first year, or for across their entire time as a student, what kind of impact are we seeing? And then all the way down to a single professor who has 25 students in a class, but maybe has 3 or 4 international students. They're able to see, okay, these students are likely to struggle here. Let me make sure that I'm doing what I need to do to provide for them in this. So it's a really interesting kind of holistic way, but even a really minute way of looking at how can we provide for these students. And, one great success story I'll share with you is there is a university within the University of Texas system down at the Rio Grande. So it's a Mexico-U.S. border, and multiple students literally cross the border on a daily basis to come to school. And so it's a relatively large student body. I believe there are about 29,000 students on campus. So as they're managing, well, first of all, they could do nothing, right? They could say these students will figure it out. They're coming here. They're paying. Let's just they'll figure it out. But instead, what they did, Samantha Lopez, who's the director of International Student and Scholar Services down there, was very proactive in saying, we want to do more. And so they began using Go Culture in earnest last semester. So it had been the fall semester, so 2019 fall. And, they let the program run on its own for these international students. And they also worked out a schedule that showed, okay, of these 15 different areas where students might struggle, in addition to the Go Culture program running on its own and providing services for these students, which campus service area do we have that could provide additional help for these students on campus, whether it be counseling, what you name it, right? Go through the list. And so they put that together and did a really great job. And what they saw over the course of a single semester was that students who were participating in the program saw a 9% increase in their intercultural competency levels. And this is huge. I mean, 9% is pretty big. It's really big, actually, because, typically they're going to be starting anywhere from the 75 to 85 probably range on their aptitudes. And if you're adding 9% to that, well, they're getting really good, right? And you think about the implications that has for their college experience, but even their implications for what that has for them post-graduation in a professional career. It's really exciting to see in a cost-effective, streamlined way how you can have such a long-term positive impact on these students.
Yeah, I think that's, one of the things I think that's important to note is that, that's from a selling point, from an institutional selling point, you graduate from UT, RGV. I've been down there, and it's, impressive campus is an amalgamation of a number of institutions, I think, back in the day. But, why is a student choosing there above others? And there is this marketing piece for the institution that our graduates are globally competent. And, in an increasingly globalized world, that competence is something that is not only requested but required. And so when you're hitting the ground running in semester one, year one, freshman, you have 4 years of this integrated institutional push for this competence, which is in a holistic sense. And I really like that idea. I want to shift. I'm looking. I knew this was going to happen, Justin. I knew once we got going, we were going to be like 50 minutes in and not have touched on COVID at all. But that's what I like about the podcast, is that, it's grown out of COVID, and I hope it goes much longer than COVID. And COVID is a distant memory, and we're still chatting away. But let's try and just shift a little bit if we can. And I want to get your experience of COVID. What's happened at Go Culture International? How has it affected you guys, on a day-to-day basis? Do you and have you worked remotely? And so it makes no difference at all. How do you stay positive? What's the silver lining? What's new normal going to be like? Pick any of those and just go.
Yeah, so, sure. Yeah, there are some initial kind of oh no type moments for like a lot of us, right? And in that we had clients signing up who were about to launch major study abroad programs or had them in place. They were just bringing us on board to enrich those programs, and who, because of all this, that they weren't doing study abroad for a period. And so they said, well, let's pump the brakes for a moment. And so on the one hand, you think, well, how long is it going to last, and things from a business standpoint. But we also know that those programs should come roaring back. But when they come roaring back, what's interesting is kind of like, again, telehealth, which people are like, ain't telehealth, and now it's a big deal. Go Culture is the offering that is able to provide this kind of level of proven research-based assessment, training, and intercultural competency online, streamlined, personal interaction without a or personal experience without a personal interaction. When everybody else, when most people are just kind of stuck in this 1970s model of no, you've got to assess, and then I got to be there on campus and be with every student and things. So I think what we're finding is that we're very richly positioned so that when we're coming out of this, people are going to look to us as, oh yeah, that actually will work, and that's what we need. And so we're real fortunate in that to be that provider. And so, we were working remotely anyway because as an online company, we're able to do so much remotely. Again, being hands off as much as individuals need us to be. I mean, we do campus visits and things, as needed, and lectures and things. But that's really what we provide is a simple implementation that is done, over the phone or online, right? Just a kind of a plug and play type deal. And so, and we partner with not only schools, we partner with Teradata as well. And Teradata, of course, has been big in study abroad and international education for a number of years. And really our partnership with them really equates to even greater ease of use in implementing Go Culture for people who use Teradata, because if they're already using Teradata, we just kind of plug and play right into that. And so students see Go Culture as a requirement at whatever phase, pre-departure, on the field, when you get back, and they have to do the assessment and the coaching. And so it helps the administrator easily track students doing that. And it gives the students one location to be able to access Go Culture. It doesn't have to be that way. We can do it, of course, one-off directly with students. But that's also a nice perk for some schools who are using Teradata quite extensively. So we're real proud about that. So, like so many others, when this first hit, there were these oh no moments, but we began to realize over time that, at least from our business model, we're in a position to where we can actually be the company who jumps in and helps when others cannot, because they cannot be there any longer.
Great. I want to thank you very much for chatting to us, for being so open. I think what you're doing at Go Culture is absolutely fantastic. I'm looking forward to getting to know more about it and really kind of understanding it. But you've explained how it's beneficial across the board, and I wish you the very best with it. I think that you are very well placed, as you say, to be able to push through and come out the other side of COVID in a healthy situation. And I wish you and your colleagues at Go Culture the best for that. To our listeners, listeners.
Thank you so much, Chris. I've really enjoyed. I always enjoyed talking to you and Kara, and so please give her my best, and I wish you all the best as Study Abroad comes back, and I highly recommend what you all do and how you do it. A lot of integrity there and a lot of fun. I've never been on one of your trips, but I can only imagine that they are not only professionally done, but just a whole lot of fun. So thank you very much.
We like to think so. We'll see. But no, I appreciate that. The listeners, thanks very much also for staying with us. And I hope that today has given you some pause for thought, and considering the different experiences of different stakeholders within Study Abroad. And please do comment and let us know your thoughts, any questions, those types of things. We really want you to engage with us in relation to this. So that has been our latest podcast of Coffee with Cal. And please stick around for next week. We'll have somebody else from somewhere else in international education, and hear what their situation is and how they're innovating and thinking and looking for the silver lining in COVID-19 and post COVID-19 world. So we wish you all the very best. Until then, stay home, stay safe, and be kind.